Greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Want to remind everybody, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. There's a PayPal link down there for anybody who wants to share some love, and of course the StreamYard link for anybody who wants to join the panel. We got John with us again here tonight. How you doing tonight, John?
Yeah, good, Keith. It's good to
Good.
see you. Yeah. How you doing?
I am well. Nice weather, finally cooled off. Got a little bit of rain and kept things nice and moist and easy today, so it was good.
Oh,
Good.
good.
Okay, folks, we are back to the exception, part 2, the entire civil service, establishing a diplomatic course. And like I said last night, and we've discussed it before, that diploma you get from high school is what we're talking about. Once you get through with this public education system, which is a general education provision under the General Education Provisions Act of a military provisional government, now you're supposedly able to go upon the world and spread your knowledge. What knowledge did you get? Certainly not the knowledge you needed to be diplomatic. So the entire civil service has become so ambiguous that it covers anybody that has an identification or driver's license issued by the state. That's saying that you're some form of state government employee or contractor. And therefore, you use that legal name with the address, with the city that you are claiming you are a resident in, under a United States citizenship of the municipality, the state, and the zoning improvement plan, saying that you're a contract postal unit. Wrong declaration, was never declared properly at the enumeration of birth, and you were automatically entered into the civil service, one form or another. So we're going to continue on tonight with the second part. This is a series of 3 videos I did back a few years ago. I think it was about 2 years ago, close to 3 years. And it was before I had the live streaming here on YouTube, so I was doing everything on Zoom. And I was limited to 45 minutes. So each of these Zooms is about 45 minutes long. So it's going to take us about 2 hours or so to go through them. So be prepared, have your notebooks and ready to take some notes. Make sure to go back and watch last night's or Friday nights, and try to use this as your foundation of putting everything together. Because this is what's happening. The enumeration of birth enters you into the civil service as an executive. You're the one that's executing everything. That's an executive position. And they're holding you liable as the executive. You're never qualified as that unless you know what's actually going on. You can't put your intent into those documents that already have an intent. You must know that intent, taxes and insurance. If that's not your intent, then I suggest you start looking at those forms entirely different. Because when you execute those forms without qualifying that signature, it becomes an endorsement, an amendment to an insurance policy. So let's get into it. Second part of entire civil service.
I'm hoping you're following along in the simplicity, and we'll take this material in your own time and research it further, and not just take my word for it being this simple. But in the end, it really is. Everything's been entered wrong, and we can prove it simply because we don't have the actual status. And this is the one we were just talking about. Inspection by immigration officers, expedited removal of inadmissible arriving aliens, referral for hearing. See, we were an alien. We were treated as applicants for admission. Mom should...
See, it doesn't say native admitted for submission. And I'm sorry for the video quality here. I don't know what else to do about it. It's a Zoom platform. review, when I don't know what it is, I guess. My apologies. So when it comes to being born native, that document is proof that you're born native because the documentation is different for immigrants. And they go through a naturalization process where they are required to take a civil service exam and pass it before they can become a United States citizen.
And it's pretty tough too, from what I understand.
Yeah. And that's why it's important to understand the distinctions here, folks. That enumeration at birth is evidence. It's evidence of an errored entry. We were entered as an alien. We are native. Understand that. Greetings, Imperium Privatus. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How about yourself, Keith?
Good, good. If you got some way to turn your volume down a little bit, that was horrendous. My apologies.
Sorry, but how's that? Is that still too loud?
That's a little better. Thank you. And Dean, yes, I went through the same thing. Selective service. I honestly thought I was going to get in, though. But they told me they couldn't let me in because I had a hearing problem. I had to have that fixed before they could let me in. They were afraid I wouldn't be able to hear their commands as they screamed them out. But I too failed because of that, and they never let me in. So, all right, back to it.
Should have never applied if they didn't know what they were applying for. Period.
And that's the foundation of the error. See, if mom and dad entered you in the system and didn't know what that entrance was doing, then it was unconscionable. This goes to the mental capacity as well as the mental state of being at the time mother was induced into signing those documents. We have to start understanding this, folks. None of it actually applies. We are native. All this documentation for identification is to keep track of people that the government is employing or contracting, not providing domestic welfare, domestic tranquility through general welfare and national security. See, that's provided already. It does not come as an expense to the people. It is a credit of the people.
Under the next one, we see a lot allocation of immigrant visas, and the visas are things that foreign countries give you in order to come to their country, and most generally
as an invitation. So let me explain this here. In the capacity of somebody that lives here on the American soil, becomes a pen pal with somebody in a foreign country. Now, the guy here on American soil or gal here on American soil becomes pen pals with the opposite sex of a foreign country and invites them over as their guest on a tour at their pleasure. These are very specific terms, folks. Now, upon that invitation by that individual, the United States has no authority. It is an invitation by you. The only thing is that there is a process to make that happen. If this country is in a treaty, international treaty, with another nation, of which I become a pen pal to a woman and I invite her over here, that treaty is based under the United Nations, and that is the Constitution of the Universal Postal Union, where freedom of transit is guaranteed throughout the entire territory of the Union.
With the Inca rules.
With the what? Oh, yeah.
With the
Yep. Incoterms. Incoterms. Yep. IN. Let's pull that up real quick. I don't know if I mentioned it in this civil service series, but it's Incoterms is the international commercial terms. Okay, Incoterms, international commercial terms, are a set of internationally recognized trade term definitions. We are not talking trade. We are talking about treaty. There is no commercial trade going on here in that woman coming over to this nation. Is that understood? That's the Declaration. And again, it's not commercial. It's a matter of diplomacy, diplomatic course.
I have a question though, but it seems that they're not viewing the woman coming over as a woman, but probably as a sole proprietor, correct? In corporate,
I don't
espionage.
I don't know, and I don't care. What we're doing is distinguishing the one venue that they do not have authority over, and that is the man, the living man. And I, as a living man, invited this living woman over, and that is under treaty, not commerce.
right. Right. We're a creation, not an
All your treaties and everything require no identification. When they start talking commerce, then they're requiring identification. No, that's under your commercial codes requiring a license or something to do trade or commerce. We are not performing trade or commerce. I am inviting her to travel, freedom of transit in a transitional phase of coming from there to here, as the God shall preserve her going out and coming in, and we stand as witnesses with that statement. Now we have 3 witnesses. Supersedes commerce in every venue. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and forevermore. Constitution of Universal Postal Union, Article 1. Freedom of transit is guaranteed throughout the entire territory of the Union. Okay, there's 2 records that say the same thing in different words. That's 2 witnesses. I agree. That's 3 witnesses. What else can I tell you? Greetings, Iman. How you doing tonight? You got to turn your background device off, sister. In some state colleges even offer a civil service class as well. Yes, some do. But it should be done in the regular provisional education system. If you want good, strong civil servants in your civil service, then shouldn't you make them good and strong in that training? Instead, they don't. What do you think the immigration is all about? What do you think this influx is all about? They're looking for foreigners that can pass that civil service test because nobody else is. Everybody else is being dumb because the education system doesn't provide for that civil service education. So of course they're dumb.
Generally, they're done under commercial terms and agreements. You can go as a traveler, as a tourist, but there's still commercial agreements made and arrangements thereof, where even as a tourist, you supplied a signature to operate as a trustee instead of a beneficiary. Waiver of job offer, national interest waiver, subject clause II. The Attorney General may, when the Attorney General deems to be in the interest or in the national interest, waive the requirements of subparagraph A, that an alien's service in the sciences, arts, professions, or business be sought by an employer in the United States.
See, it's all about the national interest as a matter of employment, folks. When we start reading these codes in comprehensive fashion, in other words, knowing what they're saying in plain writing, being able to correlate the national interest waiver to a business be sought by an employer in the United States, we understand that that last part starts out, turn the whole thing around. As an employer in the United States, business, profession, arts, sciences, the alien services thereof. They're looking for employing the immigrants.
All these jobs are asking for your expertise. Even McDonald's, you want to make paycheck, and that's the scale you can reach. They want your expertise. They want your limited expertise.
In other words, they're raising a bunch of intellectual slaves, a dumbed down citizen that doesn't know what's going on, bringing in foreigners that can and do pass the civil service test for employment in the United States.
And they start before you're 18. At 15,
Absolutely.
they start.
Absolutely.
Ledgering, right? So they can start ledgering offshore, which they're not supposed to do.
Yeah, and it's amazing how the language is used against you.
Greetings, Brother Keith. So that means if they're bringing in immigrants and there's some kind of expertise, mean that you already have to come in with some kind of a skill where you are proficient at it. Is that not so?
No, they don't care what you're proficient at when you get here. What they care about is the fact that if you go through a course for civil service exam and you pass that civil service exam, if you don't come in with a skill, or if you come in with a skill and cannot pass that civil service exam, guess what? You just emigrated yourself as a slave, like they could treat the regular natives that don't know the civil service. Your intellect is your slavery.
The Attorney General shall grant a national interest waiver.
How can it be a national interest waiver? If it's a relevant interest as an employer in the United States. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, what are they wavering?
Yeah, what they're doing is they're waiving the immigrant's national interest to his nationality for the interest of the United States as a citizen of the United States, known as a nationality, but it's not. It's a corporate entity.
So there's really no nationality then when we're born. It's just data.
Correct.
So if they claim we're a U.S. citizen, no, if they say that we're born in the United States, that is false.
Correct. The nationality is the statehood. And again, that's a republic, but it was never recorded. It was recorded in the United States through the state as a trustee and the United States as a principal. The issuance of that birth certificate is the surety bond so that those records can be corrected and that can be noted. Otherwise, you're just treated as a slave. And if you go get that education for the civil service and become a civil servant slave, you're still a civil servant slave under the United States. You still not expressed your international perspective of a prophet unto the nations. See, I don't kneel down to a patronymical father if I come from a heavenly father. I appeal to those national fathers, those patronymical fathers, to set right in their ways. I don't give a rat's ass how you say it. I'll decipher it or get it translated, however, whatever I need to, to show you how it correlates with the truth. So when we see things like this national interest waiver, we really have to learn how to break that down, because that's what they're doing. Is they're saying that it's a national interest waiver. You're waiving your interest in the nation where you came from, but you still, again, have not expressed your international interest, your international perspective. I don't care about that false patronymical nationality. I waived it a long time ago. I don't need your permission to do so. Flip the script.
Pursuant to Clause I, on behalf of any alien physician. What? What? You are shitting me.
So they're using an alien physician. Again, here in America, those doctors, as they're called, take a Hippocratic oath, including those physicians, take a Hippocratic oath to Apollo and the Greek gods.
Think about this, people. With respect to whom a petition or preference classification is filed. I don't need a physician. He who is whole is not in need of a physician. Again, not subject to your requirement of a physician. Why would I need an alien physician to concur with?
And this is the point that I run to or hit on when it comes to that enumeration at birth and that spell of illness. See, when moms go into that hospital and they think they need that doctor's help, I urge the fathers, it was the most wonderful time in my life. I'll never forget catching my son, myself. Granted, it was in the hospital, but at that point, I demanded that I be the one to catch him. So the doctor, with all his due diligence, and the nurses, with all their due diligence, did all the appreciation and got all the appreciation for all the assistance that I most certainly appreciated. But there's nothing greater. And that's something that's natural. You don't need the physician. There are midwives and people that have gone through it themselves. And it is a natural experience, not a spell of illness. You are not ill when you are bearing your children naturally. That is not an illness.
With your physician. This isn't about physicians. This is about my physical preference. It has nothing to do with a physician with respect to whom a petition, a piece of paper, refers to. No correlation. I am my own physician. I determine what goes in this thing. Protection of foreign officials.
That's making your yay, and your nay by having that knowledge to do so. Nobody's able to do so if they don't have that knowledge.
Official guests and internationally protected persons. Isn't that?
So, as an official guest, as I was explaining earlier, that's a protection. And I can invite somebody. That's a visa.
That person already supposed to be internationally protected? I mean, isn't it part of the welfare program through your health and welfare insurances to protect the mother and children?
And that's what I'm talking about with that ID. ID or driver's license is evidence of an internationally protected person.
Isn't that child, that new?
It's the person. And it goes all the way up to the treaties at the international level. It is an internationally protected person. So even under the nationality, I'm not saying you can't get an ID or a driver's license. But if you do, you have to declare the international aspect from your international perspective. I understand it's a person that I may use in that system, and that they are the ones that created it for my use in an imperfect usufruct, and I am, in fact, the only one that can perfect that title at any level.
Newborn child, even in your own codes, rules, and regulations, presumed to be a minor of the United States?
See, and that's the thing about correcting that status. Until you correct that status, I don't care if you're 50 years old or 16 years old, you're still considered a minor. It's a commercial term through that identification system. It's a different grammar definition for e-commerce. It's a minor accounting. The individual's name and number identify the record. The record is an accounting of the events. It is a minor accounting. It is not the age of majority where you can create the major accounting. I'm sorry, General. I'm the major. I'm the boss here, General.
And even if it's a minor of the state,
They're like a
the
guardian,
state
right?
ceded its
Keith?
jurisdiction.
Yes. Always a guardian, a trustee. Go ahead, sister.
Would that minor be like a minor within a material sense, like
No,
in
just the
doc?
record.
You're right. That's what I'm getting to. As far as the record is concerned, that would be the minor
Yeah.
taking. That would be them utilizing the record for the what they considered a minor person.
The record is the minor person, and they're using it in an imperfect use effect. They have no right to use it. They have a right to get paid for its use, and I am the one that's supposed to direct that usage. In fact, they are directing the usage for themselves and getting paid for it, and causing and saying we are liable, and that's a misrepresentation.
Okay, so then would the paperwork be considered material that they're
Material evidence,
utilizing?
yes, yes.
Okay,
I have
that's what I
another.
thought. Thank you.
I have
Whoa,
another question pertaining. I have another question pertaining to that concept. Would the minor of the record be the blank endorsement and either a
yes,
special or okay?
yes.
Thank you.
When you start restricting that endorsement, it's clarifying what the person is, and if you do it correctly, you're no longer signing those documents as perceived to be a minor. You're able to place supplemental information, which is major. It overwrites. Understand all the terms that I'm using here, folks.
To the United States for that very same protection.
Say that. What?
So if you're a United States citizen, aren't you internationally protected by your own code? Why are they bringing codes against you? Doesn't make sense. See, contracts are not enforceable. They only go to arbitration. The only thing enforceable in contracts is breach of the contract.
Which can be criminal.
And that's an intentional will to breach the contract. Otherwise, you can quit at any time, saying you just no longer wish to participate. That's contract law, just like the beneficiary doesn't have to accept the grant. It's trust law as well.
So Keith, does the U.S. citizen have to be registered under the Federal Reserve in order to be protected?
No, it's. Think about this, folks. This is reason and logic. This is reason and logic, John. Think about it in your own sense. If you create a child, isn't it your responsibility to protect that child? Even after
yeah.
he becomes an adult, you still have that inherent thing in your heart that says you should protect your children at all costs.
Right.
That's what we're losing. At the age of majority, everybody's kicked out of their homes and said, hey, now you're full grown. Now you get to go make your own decisions. And nobody ever teaches them how to do that.
Well, brother, don't they
Reporting
consider?
requirements. Now notice this is under foreign relations.
Say that again.
I thought prior to traditionally, young men and women were considered adults when they reached the age of 25, not before. So they're trying to get them there um, indoctrinated early. That's why they changed these ages, sometimes 16, 18, to get them into this indoctrination early so they can change the state of mindset, correct?
Correct. And you see how it's in one aspect, at least in my opinion only, it's heading towards pedophilia. That's the only time I'll mention this.
Sponsors must submit annual reports to the Department of State. Who's the sponsor? Well, that would be the guy that's on the other side of the investment scheme that the alien investor is investing with. He's the one that made the offer. He's the one that's sponsoring the contest, the competitive contracting. Applicability of reciprocity laws, equal consideration, equal benefit. If you did not think it was worthy of your efforts, do you have the right to say no? Anybody would, by reason and logic, answer that question is, yeah, I can dismiss it. I can say no. If it's not up to my standards, I can say no. So if it's adding unto or taking away from the word of God, I say no, because he says no. That's his will through me.
This is a faithful saying that I will, that thou constantly affirm that he who believed in God be careful to maintain good works. These things are good and profitable unto men. Titus 3:8.
That's the reciprocity. And if any detriment be incurred, it is to be suffered by all parties. So when they want to enforce those penalties, make sure all parties suffer those same penalties. Letter of authorization. Remember, I was telling you about that wildlife and fisheries. Guess what, folks? Here we are at 50 CFR, letter of authorization. And it says Title 50-Wildlife and Fisheries. Now, I want you to remember that because I'm going to prove something to you here in a minute. Letter of authorization may be issued only to U.S. citizens.
Any comments on that?
So this letter of authorization, that would be them saying that I am now authorizing you once you make application to be a citizen of the United States. Is that not so?
No. They have to first check and make sure that one is a United States citizen. Otherwise, it is not applicable. It's the same thing with the United States enumeration at birth, folks. If it's not applicable because you're not part of the civil service, then there is no actual letter of authorization. It was a presumption from the start by some twit at a hospital that never passed a civil service exam, likely.
Right. He's nominated, right? The birth certificate.
Nominated, delegated, educated, whatever you
Yeah.
want. I don't know, but they're babbling idiots. It's so amazing that we have this entire civil service made up of American people, and yet they don't qualify themselves.
Only to
I mean, if they think that they're qualified, again, we have doctors out there that know all of this Latin as far as it goes to medical terms and stuff, but I guarantee you they would fail both an English test and a civil service test. Sad.
U.S. citizens.
While posing to be Christians and taking a Hippocratic oath to Apollo and the Greek gods.
Is required
So,
to conduct activities pursuant.
Go ahead.
so Brother Keith, under Title 50, would not that be under war and national defense? So,
Yes.
okay, okay.
That's why I speak of
Yeah,
50
treaty
U.S.
with the enemy, correct?
Right, and that's why I speak of 50 U.S.C. 4305b2, full acquittance and discharge, in the interest of the United States, on the account of the United States, and for the person making the same, so that no person shall be held liable in any court. That's forgiveness. Everything is scriptural, folks.
To any regulations established under 216.105. And here we are.
And just so you know, I mentioned the General Education Provisions Act earlier as a general provision of the military government. And that's all part of the Trading with the Enemy Act. That's mentioned in the General Education Provisions Act, the Trading with the Enemy Act. Top to bottom, folks, it's all military.
Are specific, not general, not presumed, not assumed, not implied, but specific. Letter of authorization, request for letters of authorization shall be submitted to the Director, Office of Protected Resources. The person is a resource. It comes from a source.
The source is the man, the physical man that produces the labor, sweat equity labor. And then they resource it in a record, and that becomes an asset for them. This is 7 U.S.C. 136. Animal includes but is not limited to man.
So is this why they have all what is called these employment resource divisions or departments?
Human resource department.
Right, human resource departments.
And they resourced it. The information to be submitted in a request for an authorization will be specified in the appropriate subpart to this part or may be obtained by writing to the above named person.
Specified, as like I said before, special, specific, and species. Specified.
Issuance of a letter of authorization will be based on a determination that the level of taking will be consistent with the findings made for the total taking allowed under specific regulations. Telling you that they are taking shit.
It's all federal acquisitions, folks, at all levels. It is a taking under the Federal Acquisitions Regulations 48 CFR 52.212-5 contract terms and conditions required to implement statutes, executive orders, commercial items, commercial services.
It's the only way they can acquire things, which is the taking of things. So at the hospital, the level of taking is the data elements. They need the data elements. They don't need the baby. They capture him when he's an adult.
Yep, because they created a record that attaches him to it. And this is the problem. There has to be a superseding record. I've got a 1611 version of King James Bible, leather-bound edition, red letter edition with the family registry in it just over across the table here. Tell me that wouldn't supersede any court document, any passport. Tell me you can't travel under Psalms 121 verse 8. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and forevermore. Yeah, they might want to stop you at every border. And if you can't stand up to it, that's because it's you. Me? My body's a sacrifice. And the land shall not be sold forever, for it is his, and we are strangers and sojourners with him. So no matter what lands I am on, I don't care what your nationality says it is.
Able to defend himself. Endangered wildlife. Wildlife. What is wildlife? Wildlife means the same as fish or wildlife. So we go down to fish or wildlife means any wild animal, whether alive or dead, including without limitation any wild mammal, bird, reptile, amphibian, fish, mollusk, crustacean, arthropod, salamandrate, or other invertebrate, whether or not bred, hatched, or born in captivity, and including any part, product, egg, or offspring thereof. Mammalia. You got mammary glands? You got mammary glands? Think about that, folks. This here is Title 50. Wait a minute. War and National Defense. I thought Title 50.
You see that, Iman?
Yes. Yes, brother, I do. And as you were saying that, I'm thinking that they're seeing human beings as as part of a national resource through the agricultural as an
You got it.
agricultural means of commodity.
You got it. That's that sweat equity labor I was telling you about. That's the human resources department.
And
That's
then
where everything.
finance,
That's where everything's converted. See, Health and Human Services. That's the human resources department at the enumeration at birth level. That's where the estate is resourced through the Health and Human Services department as that resource, the initial resource. Go ahead, brother.
and then in finance, they're considering that human capital.
Yes. Yep, it is capitalism, and that's what they capitalize on. Understand that. They capitalized on the name. Greetings, King Al Bay. How you doing tonight, brother?
Pretty good, brother.
Good, good. Just going over the entire civil service, trying to show how we are the exception, and we are entered into the record in error, and considered part of the entire civil service since that time. It was made a civil issue. So
Was wildlife and fisheries.
see, and when it comes to the U.S. Code and the Code of Federal Regulations and those titles and stuff, 50 USC is supposed to match up with 50 CFR. But we see here in this instance, wildlife and fisheries under 50 U.S. Code does not match up with the 50 CFR, which is national defense. So what is it about wildlife and fisheries? United States Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of the Interior, taking, possession, transportation, sale, purchase, barter, exportation, and importation of wildlife have to do with
Hey,
this?
Keith,
It's immigration. Go ahead.
I was going to say, or is it conversion? Because over on Title
Yes,
7,
that's
136, they're considering us animals. So now you're converting natural wildlife over into the military force.
correct. That's what we're talking about. It's the resourcing. They took a natural source and resourced it through grammar, called it human and man under the category animal. But again, if animal includes but is not limited to man, then as a man under the wildlife and fisheries, am I not already internationally protected again?
Yes, it would seem that you would be internationally protected through the EPA, correct?
Correct. And it's also under the national defense. So it is an international protection. And here locally, it's protected under national defense. Does that make sense, King Al Bay? I know you're on it.
Yes. So I've been looking and studying the jurisdictions like the CFRs, how the how these three branches of government, how they're intertwined, and how the jurisdictions intertwine. So I've been looking at how each one control their prospective jurisdictions. So the stuff that you're reading off at 50 CFR, right? All of these are administrative agencies that are operating under this this commercial guild.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about earlier. It's a matter of resourcing something that's natural for a commercial use. And like I've said before, they have to actually condemn the land of its natural use in order to then build on it for commercial purposes. This includes your home. They have to condemn the land for industrial construction. Somebody goes in and buys 10 acres of land. Okay, he's a contractor and he's going to get a contractor to build on the site. So they have to condemn that 10 acres of its natural use so they can tear everything down to the ground and lay in plumbing and all that. They have to condemn it of its natural use. Same with industrial farming. They have to condemn the land of its natural use. That means, and that's what supports the vegan diet is worse than the carnivore diet. They have to destroy every living creature in there so they can grow their domestic or geoengineered product. And that's what we're
So,
talking
Brother
about.
Keith,
It's converting everything. Go ahead.
so it's this in the sense that if they also see man as the land or of the land, aren't they condemning the man as well in order to
Yes.
re-educate or re-instruct his mind so they can put him into some type of an industrial type of um, labor process?
If you live within one of these societies where the land is condemned, you're living on condemned land. You therefore too condemn yourself. That's part of the delusion.
Now that makes sense about the improvement zoning plan because you're living within those specific zones that is under Title 19 through 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 customs,
37.
Yep.
which is customary.
Yep.
Ah,
And that's the thing about the nonconformist. If you're not going to conform to society, they're going to kick you out. It's the way the system works. So rather than trying to work within a system that's going to continuously kick you out for being natural, find a natural place to go. Live outside of the city. See, the city is not meant for people to be living in it. The city is meant to be a marketplace. But because it's so convenient to be able to live right in the city and have all your wares right there in a market warehouse and take up even more space rather than living outside of the city and hauling your ass in and out of town every day with your wares and storing them at your own place. You now live in town and everything. You condemn yourself of natural living. Nobody's living naturally.
Yeah, here it is. Title 50 of the U.S. Code, and not the Code of Federal Regulations, is War and National Defense. So let's look up 50 CFR. No, it says CFR, Title 50, Wildlife and Fisheries. You see how their code is inconsistent?
And I stated that backwards. Yes, it's 50 CFR is wildlife and fisheries. 50 U.S. Code is war and national defense.
Acquisition of and expenditures on land for national defense purposes. And they need every arm and leg of every infant born in every infant ward for the infantry. And it's through the acquisition of data elements at the level known as a customs facility called a hospital, a military post. Acquisition and expenditures of land for national defense purposes. And you can go through here and read it. Look, it says repealed, omitted, repealed, repealed, omitted, transferred, omitted, repealed. You go through and you read those. Authorize Secretary of War to institute condemnation proceedings for acquisition of land, to purchase land and accept donations of land. This is where I get my language, folks, because I do my research farther than just repealed.
Yeah, see, I'm not gonna sue anybody. I'm gonna contest the record. The record shows that the land was condemned, that they're trying to use against me. I'm sorry. Psalms 128. The land shall, or the Lord preserves my going in and my coming out from this time forth and even forevermore. Leviticus 25, verse 23. The land shall not be sold forever, for it is mine, and ye are strangers and sojourners with me. So who the fuck gives you the right to condemn anything that doesn't belong to you?
Oh, well, I checked the notes and find out what it was written about. This is what led me to the 1900s, early 1900s, legal notices in the papers wherein the proper entry was made into the land records.
Hey, Keith, I got a
Uniform
question.
Code of Military Justice.
Is the CFR before conversion and then the United States Code after conversion?
No, the U.S. Code is the U.S. Code, and the Code of Federal Regulations is the one that enforces the U.S. Code. The U.S. Code is the contract terms and conditions, whereas the Code of Federal Regulations is the enforcement of those conditions. It's all for acquisitions, federal acquisitions. I don't care if it's at a municipal level, county level, state level. It is for federal acquisitions.
We are talking about a martial law, which is a provisional law, and here we have the general provisions repealed. Defined terms used in this chapter. 301 of Title 10 and 101 of Title 10 is where they sit now. So if we go to 10, USC 101, it should have a title definition. There we go, definition. If we replace it with an 801, it should too come up with another set of definitions. This one here says Article 1. And here we go, Judge Advocate General. When these administrative courts refuse to review the determination that you've made about the judicial elements, data elements that were entered wrongly, in error, and they refuse to act upon that, go straight to the Judge Advocate General. Condemn their words. They are wrong.
Contest the record for condemning their words. Isaiah 54, verse 17, no tongue shall prosper against you. You shall rise up and condemn any false judgments. This is the inheritance of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord. So when they don't accept your yea as being your yea and your nay as being your nay in their judicial system, then they are violating the word of God. They're forgetting to bring the value of God.
So if everything is what they're institutionalizing to administer would be Article 1, those administrative lower courts. So they're not judicial courts because they would have to fall under what the Constitution and the Judiciary Act of 1789 says these courts have to be Article 3 courts.
But see, that's what they're doing. Those administrative courts are acting under a prejudicial determination that's telling you it's prejudiced. Okay? It's a prejudiced system. What is it prejudiced against? It's prejudiced against the man because they are operating as Article 1 corporate personal courts. That's the exception.
Their words are wrong. Even if you had part in doing that, I accept my part in it. Please forgive me. I repent for my mistakes, and I give you this offer to repent for yours in peace. I forgive you. Forgive me. Let's go and remove all that bullshit from the record. It's hurting everybody. The Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard. Remember what I said earlier? The Navy is the one that operates in admiralty, and their extension is the Coast Guard to guard the coast, and the Marine Corps inland.
And that's where they have those, they call them Coast Guard cutters. And what they do is they cut off the tax evaders, the ones that are trying to get into port without paying taxes. And this is the Marines, are the inland marine installations as the post offices. The post offices do the same thing. That's why the taxes are duly paid by stamp. They act as revenue cutters. That's why you see those stamps, the edges, they're all wavy. Those are called pinkings. they pink them, showing that if it's done properly, then it evidences it's part of a package of stamps that have been pinked from a payment schedule.
So then the next one repealed again, 556, 551 through 556. And that was general provisions. Courts martial jurisdiction. Courts martial is a civilian venue. It's for the civilian officers of the executive civil service.
And that's what you have, is that Admiralty Maritime flag in the courts. Those are courts martials. That's a military flag. It's all military venue for commerce. Somebody mentioned earlier, that's the selective service.
Not to be facetious, Brother Keith, but I'm thinking, I mean, just forgive me if you may. So I'm thinking, and I'm breaking this down because, you know, when a lot of people go into court nowadays, they say they use the word pro se, right? So if you look at the word prosecutors, it would be pro se cutters.
Yep.
They're cutting into something.
They want a cut of the estate.
The military tribunal is for those that are actually military personnel.
That ID is evidence of military presence.
So here we have the specific regulations for all petitions. Everything's just a petition. That's all it is. It's just paperwork. And all they have the right to do is petition for it. They cannot enforce it. The only way they enforce it is by you letting them, through your fear. Get out of the fear and present the truth to them that they can't rebut. I'm sorry, I made mistakes, and here's your mistake in trying to enforce it. I can't qualify this document any longer. I can't give.
They condemn if you let them. Isaiah 54:17, no tongue shall prosper against you. Ye shall rise up in judgment against them, or against their false judgments.
Signatures. I can't. That's why I don't sign. Not qualified. Not my petition. 50 U.S.C. 4304, licenses to enemy companies.
Yeah, I gotta cut that out. My apologies for having to deal with that so far.
Okay, and this is where I want to make the important notice here. Like I said earlier, there's those three insurance schemes: marine insurance, inland marine insurance, and motor vehicle insurance.
And of course, Social Security insurance that gets you indoctrinated all the way from the start. Been telling people for many years now, it's all about the insurance and taxes. And if you're not paying attention, please watch until you get it.
Motor vehicle insurance for common carriers who have residential addresses. List
the contract postal unit by use of the address alone.
On the very instrument they are using against you, the driver's license or ID, name and address. And it is only associated through a number that is hidden in the background, which you're qualified to use under 19 CFR 149.3. You're qualified to give a number in lieu of the name and address. If you're qualified to give a number in lieu of name and address, and therefore not required to give the name and address, why sign? Again, verifying just knowledge means I don't have to give a signature. All I got to do is clarify that the name and number identify the record, and the record is wrong. I'm not qualified to give a signature to validate the assessment of the record. Your assessment is wrong. It cannot be validated. Again, it's an insurance scheme, and we need full acquittance and discharge under 50 U.S.C. 4305. We need to suspend the provisions of those regulations to me because they're not providing me squat. Relating to ally of enemy. And the enemy is the one that is entering documents into the record, placing a debt against the United States as a corporation, but isn't incorporated yet, and thus must be operating in a tax scheme.
And I can't do that anymore. I know how it works. I cannot sign in that capacity again. If I do, it would most certainly be an accident. Due to continuous and repeated exposure. that put a public liability on the record. I was taught to do so. I'm having a hard time learning otherwise. My apologies. Let me re-sign it.
And the state will prove this and charge you in the tax scheme. Regulation.
Again, remember, it's contracts, arbitrary, not enforceable.
Transactions in foreign exchange of gold or silver, property transfers. Every time you sign a document, that's what you're doing. You're making a transfer. You're operating in the position of an attorney. Vested interest, enforcement, and penalties. B2, clarifying, wherein no person shall be held liable in any court for or in respect to anything done or omitted in good faith in connection with the administration of or in pursuance of and in reliance on this subdivision or any rule, regulation, instruction, or direction issue hereunder. See, I'm not following their rules or anything. I'm giving them a directive. I'm the director. Period. I'm going to give them the directive that, sorry, the record's wrong, and you have to admit it, because if you don't, I'm going straight to the JAG. Okay, it says somebody's got their hand raised. Go ahead, Kevin.
And I will go to the JAG if IRS doesn't want to play the ball right, because I have no problem going to naval intelligence. Put that civil service exam in front of me and see if I pass. Put me to the test. I'm not here to test anybody else. I'm here to put the facts to the record as they should be.
Yes, sir. What's going on, Mr. Keith? How are you, Brother
Good.
Keith? And everybody else in the room, how y'all doing? I relate to what you're saying right now as far as you being a director. I had a child support issue, and I sent a small little note just letting them know that I don't consent to I don't consent to the consent order, because it doesn't even say child support order. But I told them I don't even consent to the order no more, and I want them to remove or terminate the order, the consent order, due to the fact that my rights are protected via the state and the federal constitution. And instead of sending it to like an agent, I sent it to the head. I sent it to the director of child support.
Correct. When we're dealing with these agents and agencies, we're supposed to deal with the head of agency. That's all we're doing. We're going through the head of agency. That's why I set up an appointment with the IRS to go over the records. Because if the lady here at the local office, directly tied in with the IRS commissioner, doesn't want to play ball, then that proves her incompetency or his incompetency. Meaning I must go higher. If that's the case, I go higher to the JAG.
And sure enough, 20 or 30 days later, I got my remedy. Just for sending out a letter just telling them I don't want to.
And Judge Advocate General, as JAG stands for, is the military Judge Advocate General instead of the Judicial Officer Department, which is a neutral and independent forum within the United States Postal Service.
So
That's an
Keith,
extent.
should one
Again,
also be
if it's an inland marine installation, then who is in charge of the Marines? That would be the Navy. Go ahead, sister.
Navy?
Yep, and that's as simple
So
as it gets,
does
folks.
that
It's
mean
all
one
contract.
should also utilize or use the military codes that are almost in conjunction or similar to the United States codes as well as the CFR codes? One that could be utilized as well, right?
Well, I utilize the correlation of the languages. Again, like I said earlier in the stream, if freedom of transit is guaranteed throughout the entire territory of the Union, that's your right to travel here in the United States. Okay? But it comes from Psalms 121:8. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. And the Bible was written long before the statutory codes and stuff. And when they wrote those, they were based on that scripture.
So the JAG
Well-
codes won't supersedes the other two codes that we that we source information from?
They have a right, they have the greatest authority. They will enforce the enforcement. They don't supersede the codes. The codes are the codes. They will enforce them. They have the greatest authority to enforce them. That's the National Defense Head. Get me to the Navy Intelligence Center.
And if you want to be the beneficiary, you're not required to do anything, so don't sign.
Yeah, so just
The
say that we are the directors.
The remedy's already there in trust law. You just have to enforce that trust law above the corporate contract law. I'm not party to the contract. Sorry.
That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I'm not party to the contract. I'm an idiot to the contract. I don't know its terms and conditions. And unless you can disclose all of those conditions to me, and I can comprehend all of those conditions and can pursue them, then we can contract. Otherwise, it would be unconscionable. If you leave out one detail that I wasn't able to be conscious of because of that, I ended up entering in air something, then that's on the unconscionability. That's the knowledge.
So that would literally bring in the controversy where, man, if you do not have that knowledge about the codes and all these rules and regulations, that would make you an incompetent, because you're not at a competent level to be able to contract with utilizing codes, rules, and regulations through the United States.
Correct. See, and that's that whole thing about the civil service exam. They're literally raising a bunch of slaves, and it's a slave of knowledge. That itself is unconscionable and is one of the greatest signs of one of the weakest nations there ever could be. If you want a strong nation and you depend on good civil servants, then you have to raise good civil servants if you're the one providing the services. It's pathetic. Again,
So
if we have...
instead of petitioning a record, one will have to contest a record instead of petition a record. Is that not so?
Correct. That's what I've been saying all along. I'm not going to sue anything or anything. I'm going to correct the records, and that's by contesting them. There's an error somewhere. Here's one error. I've got so many errors that they cannot possibly say that the record is true and accurate to any degree, because there are so many. It is entirely false, particularly when the entrance is false.
Yep, and that's awesome, because again, that's just reaffirming that all you have to do is give them notice and knowledge. Once they have notice and knowledge, they're done. I received, while I was sitting in jail in my last case 5.5 years ago, that child support. What they did, they withdrew all license sanctions. What they'd done is they'd gone through, and because I refused to pay child support, they sanctioned all my licensing, driver license, fishing license, hunting license. I don't care. I'm not qualified for those licenses. So I filed my documents in that last court case, and then all of a sudden I got a thing back from the child support services saying that they withdrew those sanctions.
And that was this on day of sentencing. I handed in with the birth certificate 4 forms, or four statements of my own: power of attorney, statutory declaration of true name, notice of foreign state status, and affidavit of domicile. And then all of a sudden, I got a letter from child support a couple weeks later, while I was sitting in jail serving that sentence, that they withdrew all sanctions, noting that they don't have any authority to sanction me. Same with child support. That's how I got my child in 2 separate child custody cases, and beat child support. They're not going to come after me anymore without me standing up and putting it to them. Straight facts. You're in error. How do I know? Because these are the data elements you're depending upon, and I'm the one that entered them and wasn't qualified to do so.
Now, why would they do that? Think about it. It's contract law. they want me to contract with them again. And I know contract law well enough that if there's no sanctions, then it's an open contract still. If there are sanctions, then they finalize the contract. That's what they did to Cuba. Think about it.
Think about that. When they sanctioned Cuba, what they in fact did was note that there was a contract. So the contract is still in play, but in order for Cuba to play, they had to pay the sanctions. After so many decades of Cuba refusing to pay the sanctions, they just reinstituted them into the contract. Diversity, equity, inclusion. Affirmative action. And it took advantage of a whole nation called Cuba. I feel sorry for them now. I think they did better when they were on their own.
So anyway,
ask them. They'll probably agree.
we're talking about giving them their remedy as well. We want our remedy of not being held liable in any court. Give them their remedy. We're the only ones that can do that. They are not willing to correct the record because the only way they make their existence is on the presumption of the record. As long as that record presumes as much as possible, they can make as much as possible. Restrict their income. Quit giving it to them. Alien property custodian. General powers and duties. That sounds like attorneys. They're the property custodian. They're the ones that hold.
And again, this is under war and national defense. So it's the military that's holding property. They're the alien property custodian. They're alien to the natives. The military is a corporate construct. The native military unit is the militia.
So, Brother Keith, I was reading a code. I was reading a code just recently, past the day, with your video, and it was saying in order for an attorney to handle any case, it would have to be the cases would have to come under the United States, and then it would only be able to deal with these employees of the United States. So that means the attorneys have to be working for the United States in some type of a capacity as well.
Right. We saw that last night in the beginning of the video. It shows that chaplain is the first one. And then they go to official, I think, and then they go to attorney. I think attorney was the second or third one there, but the interesting thing is, again, chaplain was the first. And like I've said before, the military in all capacities, when it comes to life and death situations, they're directed to go to the chaplain to get the chaplain's opinion. Chaplain always comes first. The spiritual word always comes first. Again, their law is based on the spiritual law. Go ahead, King Bay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say this for us that so I've been tracing the source of these source codes as a jurisdiction for as the military coercion. So what they got us in is a military coercion. A lot of every man from in whatever state from 17 to whatever 72 or whatever your state say, you in the military. And the women are employees. So I've been looking at that, right?
Yeah, that's the thing that ties into the labor force. That's when they started importing or instituting labor laws. And again, those are all contracts. And again, contracts are extension of the military forum. It's Admiralty Maritime. Admiralty is the law of the sea. And that's a contract on land being carried across the sea to the other party in the contract on land. So contract law of the sea does involve law of the land, and that is the transportation laws.
Right, and that gives them extraterritorial jurisdiction, right? Ain't that how they're getting that long arm jurisdiction through
Correct.
that? through those contracts to those military contracts.
Yep, absolutely. And that's those military contracts under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, needful places and buildings along Article 1, Section 8, Clause 7, postal roads.
To interject, Brother Keith, I'm thinking since the Admiralty is based on the water, and what they call Admiralty Maritime. So to me, the land part that they're utilizing, they have to come in on the banks of the water. So the
Yep,
water comes into the banks before you can fully come into the land. So that's where I'm seeing they're incorporating that along with their admiralty law. Is that not so?
yep. And if you guys understand, the Marines are the forces that extend both at the coastal line, which includes the waters, and then goes inland. The term marine, M-A, is ma, as in mother. Reen actually stands for course or rule. So ma's course. Ma, mother, is the waters. Okay? And marine is the course of the waters. Inland waters. They
Right. And to
include
me, that
and
will
they
sound that.
and they include inland postal roads as an extension of the law of the land.
So that would be Ma rain, the raining of the lands.
No, marine, the course of
Okay.
the waters.
Okay.
And
Okay.
JG says it's all a baiting game on their part. Absolutely.
Mm.
It's a game of confidence. Confidence with fidence, with fidelity. Interestingly enough, I told you guys I found out the local city and the state for all judicial officers, both, instead of using surety bonds, they use fidelity bond. And if you remember correctly, fidelity bond is covering the postal office.
That property, right? They can't own it. They're just the custodian. It's saying they're custodians. Who are the custodians? This is the military code, folks. It's the military. Holds all property in abeyance.
And that's John Trump. John Trump, working for the government intelligence agencies back in the day when Tesla died. And they came in as foreign property custodians and took all of his chests. Why did they do that? Because that was information pertinent to patents that were registered in the United States. So they had a claim on that material as it goes to competitive products, using contract law for acquisitioning it.
Until a rightful owner comes forth and makes a valid claim. Pure and simple. List of enemy or ally of enemy officers, directors, or stockholders of corporations in the United States.
Directors or stockholders of corporations in United States. In United States. Not in the United States. In United States. Grammar is specific. Every little word counts. United States is a corporation, and I am a stockholder of such corporation because I've got a bond that I need to surrender to them. Surrender. Render in sir. That's the merger through a reversion, reverting it back to the United States in their interest rather than the interest of the state, so that they can, in equity, revert and merge the actual true credits of the estate into a new trust, the new surname.
Constituting trade with enemy prior to October 6, 1917. Remember I talked about those early legal notices, conveyance of property to custodian, voluntary payment to custodian by holder. Now, wait a minute. If they're the custodian, isn't custodian the holder?
Voluntary payment to custodian by holder. Does that sound like indemnification, anybody? Does that sound like that fidelity bond, paying the postal service if you cause them any harm, damage, or injury by making it preemptive notice through indemnification? See, that's that. Commanding officer shall cause receipts to be issued so the spoliated owner may obtain indemnity. I've got receipts with the birth certificate. All I have to do is make my qualified statement of indemnification with the Postal Service. In that transfer, expenses incidental to Postal Service. Expenses incidental to transfer of title to the Postal Service. Now, why would you transfer a title to the Postal Service? And this is why I'm saying I believe that's where that title is supposed to be sitting. That's the master trust that is tied to the general ledger. 3 days out of balance, and they have a requirement to research and resolve the issue.
How come all of a sudden now we have a custodian and a holder? Acts under rule or order, rule or regulation. Contracts, mortgages, or pledges against or with enemy or ally of enemy. This is the birth registration. It was a pledge. And the contract was an abrogation and suspension by limitation.
Abrogation and subrogation. You guys see that? What about interrogation? Abrogation, subrogation, interrogation. So when that enumeration at birth happens, that's an investment for an investigation, whether you believe it or not. They're going to let you keep putting data elements into their record so they can invest. Gate. They are the gatekeepers.
And you know, Keith, if you look at the word subrogation, the AB would be a prefix, the IR would be a prefix, and the SUB would be a prefix attached to the word gation.
Yes. So it's important to understand the construction of the language so that you can tear them down and find out what those prefixes and suffixes mean according to the root word. What is rogate?
Exactly. And it seems like ab would be a taking away with the sub under interrogation, the IR.
Yep. Inter. That sounds like it's internal. Internal. So internal to what? It was taken in. It was imported. They are the importer. That means they are holding the record. That means they are the liable party. No matter how you look at it, they're still liable. Now that I hold the record, I'm liable. And I ordered that record with an intent to fulfill an obligation in equity. That's what I'm doing. I'm showing them their own terms and conditions of the abrogation of contracts. And I'm giving full acquittance across the board. I'm directing that. Because ain't none of them throughout my entire 59-year life ever done it themselves. Likely because none of them knows any better. Sickening, saddening, yes. But it will get better if more people like myself rise up and start doing this stuff. I'm telling you, it is a lot of research. But I'm telling you as well, it's a lot easier if people understood this the system right from the start instead of having to dig into it and learn it on their own, because ain't nobody know what's going on. We're nothing but Hitler's willing executioners at this point.
Somebody want to say something? Okay, I'm
Now,
continuing.
as I'm
The
now,
claims to
now as
property
I'm look,
transferred to custodian.
Go ahead.
and I think this code that you're showing right now, 50 U.S. Code 4308, says it's specifically what's being done. They're wanting you to contract, and through the contracting, you have to mortgage or pledge yourself in order for them to have authority over the man.
Well, they need a pledge, and that's what the birth certificate is. And that's why the state's holding it, because they're the ones pledging it in all these cases, not you. So they get credit for the pledge because they're pledging it in their name. They're pooling everything and making that in their name. That's an investment. Okay, what we're doing is taking it from the state, surrendering it to the United States. It's a salvage operation. And they're going to take their interest and they're going to get money out of it. What is the money they're going to get? It's going to be release of the debt. Me, I'm going to get a reversion of all the credits through a merger of the estate in a new trust.
The claim is to the original document that mom signed, because that's the initial entry into the records of data elements that were unlawfully converted to a corporate status without any further knowledge or education being given as to how it's used.
And that's that custodian is the registrar at the local county where you were born. They still hold that record. You need to remove that record. That's expenses incidental of title to expenses incidental to transfer of title to the agency. They need to hand that over to the state. The state's supposed to hand that and everything else over to the United States. The United States is supposed to clear and settle all accounts, paying off all creditors, making everybody whole, and anything that's remainder is reverted to me in a transfer expenses incidental to the title to the Postal Service. And those credits are now an advance credit deposit, specially named in that trust. It's all done electronically.
Okay? You don't give an 18-wheeled rig to a 10-year-old child to use. You put it in the custody of a trustee who has a responsibility to turn that property over to the beneficiary when the beneficiary can use it without legal terms.
And therefore, they never teach us how to use it so they can keep administrating it to their advantage. Does it make sense?
It's not a legal thing once the custodian has property in his vested interest because he's being compensated for one day to transfer it to the beneficiary. He's not then to turn around and put the beneficiary through a bunch of tests. This is the problem. People want to take upon the convenience of modern things. Keep it simple and learn how to use things in the right manner first, and then you can learn how to use these modern things in your adult age. Notice of claim filing. That was the initial filing that I'm talking about again. Return of property, property rights, suits to recover. We're not in a suit to recover. We're removing all the suits that were enacted upon without proper incorporation. Sale of claimed property in time of war or during national emergency. There's never been a thing where time since Congress walked out and died that we haven't been in a national emergency.
Everything's been under a banking emergency of some sort. Everything. Some kind of documentary emergency.
Period. 50 U.S. Code 4310 Acts permitted applications.
And this is why it's so inherently important to have civil servants that do know what's going on, so they can produce that paperwork properly. It does help with the Paperwork Reduction Act. It does prevent the bank emergency. It does prevent all kinds of stuff. Knowledge is the greatest benefit.
For patents. Well, why are you applying for patents when things are already patent? What is done is what ought to be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Again, we're just correcting the record. I don't need to apply for a patent. In fact, applying for a patent wherein I have to give you specific elements that are private according to my invention that you get to turn around and publish in the World Forum so everybody else can repeat and make money off of. That's just stupid. If I want to keep it.
That's why Elon Musk doesn't do that. He leaves it all open patent. Lets anybody come get it. He has car companies going out buying his cars and making extra parts for him, flares, or changing the style and remaking it and making money off it. He doesn't give a shit. That's why he did it. He's making good money on his shit. Let others reinvent it and make it again. See, the patents are actually restricting that knowledge. It's a prevention. Same with trade names, trademarks, and copyrights. It's all proof of wants and desires, greed, gluttony.
Private, why would I give it to you when you plainly tell me you're going to publish it? That's just dumb, people. Or registration of trademarks or copyrights. Again, registration of trademarks or copyrights is a pledge to let them use it. A copyright, in fact, is a copyright by itself. It does not take an enactment of any kind of law. It is patent. Payment of tax in relation thereto. In relation thereto what? Applications and registrations. Not the patents, trademarks, or copyrights, but the applications and registrations. Licenses under enemy-owned patent or copyright, which can only be done by Congress. Congress shall lay and collect taxes and duties. Therefore, they're the ones that allow for the licensing to collect taxes and duties in a commercial fashion and then be enforced through a military branch. Statements by licensees.
So by that very premise of signing up for a patent, you are applying to be taxed.
Did you forget to put that qualifying statement in?
Ask Elon. Another reason he doesn't do it, it avoids taxes.
In there certifying that you, in fact,
Not all of them, but certain ones.
did take an oath to perform the functions of office and can take upon the commercial licensing thereof of a person incorporated with contract of the United States under Federal Acquisitions Regulation 52.212-5, wherein contract terms and conditions are required to implement those statutes and executive orders, so long as there are commercial items attached. If you haven't, then ain't none of it valid. And I didn't do it, and Mom didn't do it when she established that corporation either, or when she participated in that. It was never done. Certification is false.
It was unconscionable. And I have evidence, because there is no record of my mother being capable either. There's no record of her that I know of, and I can competently say it, I believe, because of the knowledge I have, that she neither was in fact a United States business. I'd like to see the permit to do business qualifying my mother, Mary Ann Speck, to do business, Mary Ann Conrady, to do business in that name. I want to see it. It won't be there. It'll be a presumption through a state ID or a driver's license. Never certified. No one gave their statement of intent anywhere.
Period. Property transferred to alien property custodian. And they're the ones that hold it. And they will gladly give it to you. That means they are holding evidence in, on, and for the record of tortious wrongs, unconscionable contracting, breach of trust. 4313, statements by masters of vessels and owners of cargoes before granting clearances.
So there's no statement of intent to enter. It was entered with a document signed by an informant and no statement of intent. No statement by Mom before granting clearance. It was never properly cleared to be entered.
The clearance was granted not by the owner, but by somebody else who had a vested interest in it as a public trustee because they were going to get paid to do so. They didn't give a rat's ass about the other part. The only reason they did it is because they had to do their job. I'm just doing my job. Again, plain stupidity. All of these people are incompetent, and I pointed it out many times. These doctors.
Just doing your job doesn't make it valid, people. That's the point. Just doing your job includes making sure that it's valid. And if you're not making sure that it's valid and you say you're just doing your job, you are incompetent, because it's a requirement to have a statement.
Take an oath, a Hippocratic oath to Apollo and the Greek gods. Can't read plain English, and yet profess to have gone to medical school for 18 years and know the medical profession that uses the English language while using Latin medical terms. Monica! How you doing, sister?
Music. I'm doing well.
Great. Glad you could join us. We've only got just under 3 minutes left, so I'm going to cut it now. I still got more windows, so I'm going to open the room again. This is the second session. I already did one session. I'll just open it for a third session. And it's
So what do you think, guys? Anybody? Hold on for a second. Let me go out and come right back in. I lost my video.
Mm.
Okay, we are back. So, comments. If you're talking, King, you're muted.
I was just talking to my kids.
Okay, I would see this, Keith. Outside of looking up the etymology of words, we also would have to look up the prefix, the root, and the suffix of words. And because I'm going through the word ignorant, and if you look at it, breaking it down as IG in the prefix, it show you 3 different breakdowns and meaning of what it is. And then if you look at NOR, NOR as a prefix, it also breaks that down. And then if you look at ANT, ANT as the suffix, it truly gives you the meaning of how words are put together, because they first have to put together the root and then attach a prefix along with a suffix.
Right, and those prefixes and suffixes are translations or transformations. So you could have a word and then add a suffix, and it transforms it from, say, a noun to an adjective or something.
I got a question, Keith. Why can't we just sue for a permanent injunction?
Because that's in effect what the indemnification is going to be. When you place it with the Postal Service, that title with the Postal Service, everywhere that they post something to a record has to match up with the post, whether it's military or diplomatic. So when mom goes to the hospital under that supposed spell of illness, all they got to do is show them the title already fixed at the post office. Your post office here is not going through the Chamber of Commerce to the United States. It's going straight to the post office. That's where the title is already held. This is an estate under that title, or a legacy heir under that titled estate. It's not going to be merged into the public. It doesn't need a alien custodian. We take care of that. That's the whole problem. That's why that King James Version of the Bible with that registry is so important. It supersedes everything. I've got, like I said, I've got one sitting over there, and I've got a note with my companion, because I'll be damned if I was looking at it the other day and my fucking name isn't in there yet. So
I know we had talked about this in the past about dealing directly with the post office and having that everything corrected through them to allow them to be the fiduciary and handle all of that on their side and deal with all of that for as correction the name and the status, so that you don't get caught up in this public play that everybody participating in. So it's just for as, but what happens if the like what I'm starting to learn is a lot of people that sit in these seats, they don't really even understand the law that they're supposed to be fulfilling.
yeah, that's what I mean. A lot of them don't understand that when it comes to the record and the information they're taking, it's their responsibility to know the very terms and conditions on those applications and what they mean. And if they don't understand what person means or what first and last name means, things like that, that shows they're incompetent to the very language that they're using to convey debts and transfer properties and stuff. That means they're probably doing it wrong. So I say we're slowly becoming a Hitler's willing executioners just because I'm just doing my job. And that's not a good enough excuse, because your job pertains to moral ethics and making sure that the record is correct. And I'm telling you, it's wrong. And just because you want to sit there and say, well, you're a United States citizen, it applies to you, doesn't mean it does, because that's where you're wrong again. If you don't understand what a United States citizen, I'll ask people, are you a man? And they'll tell me yes. So are you a Christian? You believe that breath of life makes you an act of God every second you live? Yeah. So then why do you tell me you're a man? Because I am. Well, evidently you're not a Christian then, because you don't understand Genesis 2:7. God formed man of the dust of the ground. And when he breathed the breath of life into his nostrils, man became a living soul. So what is the difference, folks? What is the difference, folks, between a man and a living soul? Look them up. Man is a noun. Living soul is what? Go ahead, sister.
Well, Brother Keith, when I was coming into the spiritual awakening, I remember we went over, I believe it was Genesis 1:26, and they were talking about where the creation of male and female created he them, and then there was a second creation where man was created from the dust of the ground. So what is the difference between those two, as opposed to, the new creation in Genesis 2:7?
The two creations are just like I just said. Look up man and you'll find out it's a noun. So one is a noun and one is an adjective. One is a description, one is a process.
So
We
would
can
that
say the
mean that
word
the
as well.
process they're utilizing for female and male, because if you break up the word fee and male, the fee would be the iron. That would be some type of a
No, you're
some type of
conflating.
a metal.
No, you're that's
Well, I'm talking
that's the noun. That's the noun. Genesis 5
right, but
5:2 is the noun. Genesis 2:7 is the adjective.
okay.
It's the
So what I'm thinking about in the fee would be the chemistry part of it. If you look at the periodic
right,
table.
right, right. Go ahead, Imperium Privatus.
I was gonna say on top of it being an adjective, it could also be a verb, if I'm not correct, right? In action.
I don't
Is
know.
so
Live is a verb, but
but I mean I guess
living soul is an adjective.
well I guess I was referring to the soul.
Well,
Wouldn't it be
but that's still not living soul. When you separate them, then they're going to be separate. But living soul together is an adjective.
okay. Got you.
All right. Well, with that, we come to the end of tonight's stream. I want to thank everybody for your support. Hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, there's a PayPal link for anybody who wants to share some love. You guys got anything on the way out?
I do have a question pertaining to
Thanks a lot.
the
Go
last
ahead.
stream on Friday, on how you were talking about the pen name and the pen name being hearsay.
Yep.
Is it can the pen name? Because my concept was that the pen name can also be your common law name, and the common law name is your declaration or proclamation of your name, or could it be also your true name as you self-identify in good faith?
I don't know anything about what you're calling true name or common law name. Those are, it's either a pen name, given name, surname, or first and last name, legal name. You know, anything that they classify as a legal name is not the given name. The given name is what they call the first name. And some people have two given names. Most people nowadays have two given names. That's the name. And it's not even yours. It was given for use. Do you have the name on you? Is it possessory? It's not.
One thing I noticed, Keith, when you keep saying the word service, it kept ringing a bell in my head as S-U-R-vis, service, the
Service.
S-U-R.
Service. What's a vice?
Right. Well, as a vice is something you use to constrict and hold something very tight. So I'm
Yep.
thinking in my mindset, in my eyeset, even though they use the SER in the word service, you can also substitute it because, like any vowel, A-E-I-O-U, you can substitute one of those vowels. And that's why I'm seeing within my mindset the S-U-R in the service and the service. If it makes sense to anyone, I yield.
Absolutely. This is the same with bind, or bind, bond, bund, band. It's all the same. It all means the same thing. It doesn't matter what the vowel is. It's still saying the same thing. It still sounds the same, don't it? Sir, S-I-R, surname, S-U-R, service, S-E-R, SARS-CoV. Think about it, folks. It's a grammatical fucking gymnasium. And with that, folks, we are out. And you know me. I love you. But I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. That's to say, I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you don't respect me. That's on you. So may God bless you and have a good night. Bye now.